Hello, hello, hello. Welcome aboard. Welcome aboard over to our stream today. Once again, we have a bunch of really exciting comic book previews to touch on as of today. There's some really interesting new developments happening over in Daredevil that we're going to preview a little bit later on in the stream. I'm still actually really excited. I'm still very enthusiastic about that current run over on Daredevil. We're also going to touch on some preview pages that we got actually, I believe a couple weeks ago over for the resurrection of Magneto. Those pages are so beautiful. They actually have a lot of plot threads in common over with X-Men Red that I was actually really surprised to see. And then as we mentioned up top too, we're going to be talking a little bit about Amazon's Attack issue 2. That was also a really strong individual chapter that we're going to be discussing. Once again, I'm pretty happy about how the Wonder Woman property is actually feeling pretty cohesive over from like issue to issue, even series to series here. So many individual comics are referencing the events that took place over in Wonder Woman 1. And I think that some of these other like DC adjacent titles too are carrying the continuity for Amazon's Attack. It's really cool to see Mary Bromfeld as she's known in recent continuity here, also take up the roster alongside people like Yara Flor as well as Faruka. We're going to have a lot of really exciting coverage over on that in just a few minutes here. We're actually going to go ahead and kick off our stream over with that story. And we're going to be devoting a lot of time this particular stream towards the Twilight Court. I feel like we've actually talked about the Twilight Court so many times across our various streams, but I'm really excited to get a refresher on that and to preview all the really harrowing new ways that the Avengers are about to encounter this really interesting villain. Elsewhere, we're going to be touching on the latest Thunderbolt series over from Marvel. I think once again we've seen some of these preview pages from Geraldo Borges, but this time they're actually lettered. So we have just something a little bit different to look forward to. I'm going to come out and say hi here. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our stream today. My name is Arakko Braddock, and I am so excited to go ahead and touch on our vast roster of comics today. Over on this stream, we're actually going to be talking about a lot of books, or a lot of news stories rather, from the previous couple weekends here. There's been some really fascinating developments, especially over with SpiderMan, that I am super excited to touch on. We're also going to be previewing some of the latest comic book previews for books coming out over on Tuesday and Wednesday, over from Marvel and DC. So excited about where the publishing lines are headed for both Marvel and DC right now. I think without further ado, we can go ahead and shoot directly over into Amazon's Attack issue 2 here. That is going to be the first comic book that we go ahead and cover today. Give me one moment here as I just kind of catch my breath and collect myself here. Whew. I've actually been pretty impressed with how many people have singularly requested more coverage over on Amazon's Attack. That's actually been quite lovely for me because I actually didn't know how many people are paying attention over to the series. Let's go ahead and preview the cover of the issue. Here's a look over at the cover coming in from Clayton Henry on Amazon's Attack. And I just want to go ahead and introduce this series before we head any further into it. So essentially right now, the Wonder Woman line is incredibly cohesive here. Over in the main Wonder Woman book, there was a massive attack stemming from what looks to be like an Amazon copycat over in a bar in West Billings, Montana. And some of these events have just been so harrowing. There were so many people caught up over in that Amazonian fight that some of the repercussions are spilling out into several Amazon adjacent books. And since that West Billings attack, there's also been a series of copycat attacks. And this is where our really unlikely team of heroes that we can see on the cover find a way to reunite here in order to kind of solve these problems and put an end to some of these attacks. So our cast over in Amazon's Attack consists of, we have Queen Nubia, Mary Marvel, also known as Mary Bromfeld, the new champion of Shazam, Queen Faruka, and we have Yara Flor over in the series. We also have a direct preview of Amazon's Attack coming in over from Adventures in Poor Taste. Let's go ahead and start off on our review of the issue by checking out the solicit here. Amazons take Manhattan. As rumors of the Amazons' true nature spread far and wide, our heroes take Manhattan. Turns out the Big Apple isn't the only apple to worry about, as fruits from the goddess of discord enter the scene and poison the minds of men. Will our ragtag group of Amazons ever be able to find shelter from the cruel world that prays for their downfall? So, just as a little bit more addition to our commentary on the overall issue here, I've particularly been looking for more Yara Flor material published over from DC, especially as writer Tom King and artist Daniel Sampere have recently introduced Trinity, the daughter of Wonder Woman. So the fact that we finally have another outfit for Yara Flor and Mary to Thrive has really made Amazon's Attack feel like a really essential comic book. Also, before the main Wonder Woman series started over from Tom King, I think Becky Cloonan and Michael Conrad's previous run on the series had such a strong focus over for some of these Amazonian characters, like Nubia and Faruka. I'm so happy that DC is publishing like this additional series because I really do think it helps their continuity feel a lot more cohesive here. We also talked about a lot of these same ideas in our review of the Speed Force issue, which I had similar thoughts about, even though I think that series is a little bit more quirky over in response to this Amazon's Attack issue. Let's quickly go ahead and call out the creative team here. This one is written over from Josie Campbell, featuring art from Vasco Georgiev. We have colors from Alex Guimarães and letters from Becca Carey. So over in my review of the first issue, I was really taken by how much artist Vasco Georgiev has seemingly sort of like leveled up his line, leveled up various aspects of the page design. And while I think this sequence kind of recapping the political climate over with the West Billings attack and all these copycat problems is a little bit redundant due to how many times it's been like referenced in the overall comic book series, I do think Georgiev manages to make really captivating layouts over in some of these preview pages. I love the bleeds over in, with this character of Harold Knox. I love the kind of ghostly hue over with, I believe, Nubia in the background here. Really want to give a quick shout out to Alex Guimarães in really changing up the colors as soon as the individual scene calls for it. However, as we mentioned up top, this kind of opening introduction sequence was a little bit redundant, and it may be because I've spent so much time researching, this Amazonian, all this current status quo with the Wonder Woman characters, that this sequence wasn't quite as captivating to me, but it was really refreshing to see the character of Veronica Cale featured towards the end of this sequence. She's been in so many disparate Wonder Woman titles. I was also super, super happy with the way that Vasco Georgiev was able to render the expression over on Cale too. It just really shows me that there's so much progression in terms of the artwork from Georgiev here. On this next page, we get a little bit more caught up with the rest of our, disparate Amazonian-based heroes over in Amazon's Attack issue 2. I thought it was super cool to have some of these characters show up in the middle of New York City here. I also thought it was really cool how this second issue followed up immediately over on the cliffhanger from last issue. It feels like the stakes are really, really high in this portion of the comic book as the police are closing in on some of our heroes, as well as this individual character who also has this fruit from the goddess of discord that we mentioned over in the solicit for the issue here. Really think that some of the pacing and the page design over from Georgiev is quite staggering here. I almost think that the way that the expressions are rendered over on Yara Flor recalls series artist Joelle Jones in all these different contexts. Plus, I think it's really cool how author Josie Campbell is also referencing the character of Hoppy the Bunny as really as a means for our characters to escape this really high profile, dangerous context that they're in the middle of, be it that they're in the middle of New York City surrounded by all their threats and villains over in the installment. So it looks like this is the end of our preview issue. I had a couple more notes that I listed over in this chapter here. So once again, there's amazing pages, there's amazing expressions, and another really cool aspect about this issue is this character who has the fruit over from the goddess of discord. And some of these other threats also reference Dr. Savannah, who's been a long time coming Shazam character. Really cool to see all these different aspects of continuity referenced. We also got to see Yara Flor in particular reference some of her background over with the goddesses really late in the issue. I thought it was super cool how Hoppy the Bunny was able to come through in some of these final moments and finally teleport our characters out of this massive sequence here. And the last page teasing the location of the asylum was also really, really interesting. I think the pacing of this issue was incredibly solid here. I thought Josie Campbell just has a really fantastic voice for some of these disparate characters, and the plot of Amazon's attack is still moving really, really fast here. I hope they can kind of keep up the tension, and I hope in future installments in particular, we get a lot less of the political ramifications, because I think by now we are well aware of the stakes and threats happening in the background of the Amazon's attack series. I almost wish some of this material could have been featured over in the main Wonder Woman book as well here. All right, well, I believe that was our full coverage here of Amazon's Attack issue 2. I have to say, for the most part, I still think the series is in a fantastic place. I think the way they're following up on the main Wonder Woman cliffhanger is great. The way the series has acknowledged all these like disparate aspects of recent Wonder Woman continuity has just been fantastic. And I'm particularly happy that there's an outlet once again here for Yara Flor and Mary Marvel to shine. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed our coverage over for that issue. Really want to encourage you to keep reading and keep checking out Amazon's Attack. I think it's continued to be a really strong series here. All right, without further ado, why don't we go ahead and switch gears a little bit and talk about the most recent issue of Daredevil. I have absolutely loved this series. I think the way that Saladin Ahmed has written Matthew Murdock has been so intriguing, especially in the fallout of Chip Zdarsky and Marco Cicchetto's Daredevil run. Daredevil seemingly died towards the end of that run and was brought back to life. However, in his new status quo, he's currently a priest overseeing the St. Nicholas Youth Home. And I think what this has effectively done is given Daredevil more responsibility than he's ever had before, and has really made this series test him even harder than ever before. There's also been a lot of really fantastic Daredevil subplots. Currently, Elektra is still operating as Daredevil as a response from the previous Daredevil run, and after being very apprehensive about it because he is serving as the director of the youth home, Matthew Murdock did eventually slip back into his costume to try and fight back against the corrupt cops. In the previous issue, we also learned that it looks like there's a gang called the Heat that's controlling some of these corrupt cops over across New York. Also, to make things even more tricky over for Matt Murdock right now, one of his best friends, Ben Urich, is running a seemingly smear campaign over against the St. Nicholas Youth Home because he actually might be influenced by a little bit something different, a little bit of an interesting spirit. In the first chapter of Daredevil, Matthew ran into this really fascinating existential threat that he essentially had to exorcise. There's so many incredible subplots happening in the current run of Daredevil. Let's go ahead and see where Saladin Ahmed and artist German Peralta are headed over in Daredevil issue 4. Don't miss Bullseye. Bullseye makes his bloody entrance into Matt Murdock's new life, and Hell's Kitchen is caught in the crossfire. As the bodies pile up, Daredevil is forced to make an impossible choice between stopping his deadliest enemy and saving the soul of his friend. A demonic entity has targeted those who were close to Daredevil, including Elektra Natchios. The battle for Daredevil's soul reawakened Matt's long-hidden memories of his previous life. He is Daredevil once more. Meanwhile, Matt was shocked that dangerous rumors about St. Nicholas Youth Home originated with Daily Bugle reporter and old friend Ben Urich. To make matters worse, a new and violent gang threatening Hell's Kitchen, the Heat, has hired Daredevil's greatest enemy, Bullseye. And that was one of the big revelations we saw in the last chapter of this series, was that Bullseye is also one of the aspects involved over in the Heat. I think German Peralta is so much different as an artist than what we've seen over in previous issues of Daredevil with Aaron Kuder. There is so much shadow draped across all these pages, and I feel like we get more of a traditional Daredevil set of interior art than maybe what readers are used to on the book. But I think Saladin Ahmed's writing, I think his dialogue and captions are so solid in the issue that it actually doesn't weigh the series down at all. On this page, we get to see Daredevil interrogating this character who's involved over with the heat within a really violent aesthetic here. I almost think, if I were to look at this issue over from a first glance and just check out this one page alone, I might think that the comic book is a little bit too melodramatic. But I think when we switch over here, there's just so much great inner monologue over from Matthew. And I think the way that Matthew eases up on the tension over with this character and decides not, essentially to commit a violent act to him is also really interesting. The way that this Daredevil comic book kind of balances Matthew's morality as a priest versus a superhero is such a great way to introduce a moral quandary for this character. Let's go ahead and preview just some of the really interesting captions here. But before we do that, I do want to focus in on German Peralta's line just a little bit longer. First of all, I love how this panel with this character features so much big emotion and serves as the background for the overall page. And also the way that these individual panels follow up on this sequence with the bleed over from Daredevil over towards the very bottom of the page is just absolutely wonderful. His heartbeat is like a rabbit's fear taking form as sound. He passes out before we reach the next rooftop. Used to be doing things like this to men like this made me feel righteous. These days, I mostly feel shame. But desperation is stronger than shame. I've spent days combing these streets for a clue about Bullseye's target. For this man will tell his friends about his little ride, they'll talk more easily because of it. That's something. I tell myself that something is worth all the cruel things I had to do. I tell myself that when you're dressed as the devil, you have to play the part. I love all of the way that Saladin Ahmed introduces Daredevil's inner monologue here. I think the one aspect about this particular page that really has me thinking is the way that Daredevil used to enjoy some of the violence that he would commit over across these more street level goons. And now it just gives him this kind of element of shame, this element of fear. I think this perfectly introduces some of the religious elements, as well as the way that Daredevil is kind of carrying himself as a priest over in the comic book page as well. All right, let's go ahead and wrap up our preview with this final page of Daredevil captions. This is also just a tremendous page over from German Peralta here too. There's really fantastic bleeds and a lot of solid motion captured from Daredevil. Also, the shadow cast over on the side of this building is really beautiful. This new gang, the Heat, is working with Bullseye, who might just be the most dangerous man I've ever met. And I've met a lot of dangerous men. Bullseye is an assassin. The assassin that if they brought on it means they're planning a big hit, but who's the target? As usual, the streets claim 100 different things. The Heat are government sponsored. There is Staten Island gang that's expanding. They're all clones. Fortunately, I've got an appointment tomorrow with the man who knows Hell's Kitchen inside and out, a man who always knows the truth. I just need to find out why he's been lying. Yeah, I think the way that Saladin Ahmed carries on the dialogue with Daredevil really gets readers naturally immersed in some of the storytelling. Also, Ahmed has so many different subplots weaved across this Daredevil book, but the way he kind of tackles them one by one over with these captions from Daredevil, I think makes it really easy for readers to get really immersed within the storytelling. He ends off here with Matthew just running across this building, seemingly thinking about Ben. He says, I just need to find out why he's been lying. I'm really impressed in particular with how this issue is paced over with Saladin Ahmed and German Peralta. Peralta strikes such a fine balance between crafting a really melodramatic story and a story introducing some of the pathos over with the Daredevil character. Very excited about where this book is headed and just for all the immense quality that we've seen in this current run with Daredevil. And yeah, very interested in seeing what kind of moral quandaries Matthew Murdock is going to run into past some of these preview pages in the next chapter of this upcoming series here. without further ado, why don't we head into one of our very biggest stories over of the day? This is one that I've been anticipating for a really long time now up on the channel. Let's talk a little bit about the upcoming Avengers villains known as the Twilight Court. Now, these characters were teased such a long time ago in a recent timeless one shot over from Marvel. Evan Rager, thank you so much for coming to check out the stream. Really good to see people supporting us over on Twitch in particular. I know our stream is growing a lot over on Twitch. Yeah, but very glad to see you here. Welcome aboard. Right now, we are talking a little bit about the Twilight Court. For those not in the know, these are the upcoming villains headed over to the main Avengers series. They were teased a very long time ago over from Marvel in a timeless one-shot. This is what I'm referring to right here. In 2022 was when these characters were first introduced here. They were actually fighting over against Kang and delivered a lethal blow that kind of spawned the upcoming Avengers series. Nobody except me. Really good to see you too. Welcome aboard here. All right, let's go ahead and explore the history of the Twilight Court with this article coming in from Fandom. Big thank you over to them. By the way, of course, the creators for the Twilight Court are listed here as Jed MacKay and Daniel Acuna. The cryptic mastermind known as Myrddin eventually became interested in the missing moment, a specific point in the timeline from which a great historical prize could be acquired. The missing moment could not simply be accessed from time travel technology, but unlocked through tribulation events. However, only heroes could meet such events. As such, Myrddin created his own group of superheroes to do his work for him, technologically forging their body and soul for his cause. His 7 creations received designations that match their heroic status: Star, the Icon, the Witch, the Construct, the God, the Engineer, and the King. Simultaneously, the intertemporal tyrant Kang the Conqueror was also on a quest to find the missing moment. Myrddin attacked Kang in the flagship of his fleet Prospero. Okay, before we get into the nuts and bolts over with the Twilight Court as well as the Avengers, I just wanted to say some of the information that I have at hand. I believe that one of the reasons why Kang is seeking out the missing moment is because he's looking for that point in the timeline where he becomes the character of Immortus. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see if the missing moment is indeed connected to that. There's been so many like individual pieces of continuity that have teased that out here. When confronted by the Twilight Court, Kang destroyed the ship and teleported away. The Twilight Court followed him across time through tribulation events. Kang was able to evade Galhut and Lancelot, but had his armor compromised by Bedivere and Bersalak. He was able to converse with the group of heroes to suggest to Mordred that Myrddin was a villain with selfish intentions just like him. After outperforming Parsifal in hand-to-hand combat, Kang alleged to the leader of the Twilight Court that Myrddin was using them, just before being surprisingly impaled by Myrddin and forced to vanish to a location out of time. So Kang's massive fight over with some of these characters within the Twilight Court caused him to team up with some of the Avengers. I've been actually a little bit frustrated with the main Avengers series because since it launched, I've been waiting for them to head back into this really big storyline. Thankfully, in the very last issue of the series, they finally teased the fact that we are headed for a direct confrontation with the Avengers and some of these characters in the very next issue. We're going to check out a preview for Avengers 8 in just a moment. But before we do, I want to see if we can catch up on some of the individual names for these characters in the Twilight Court. So we have Mordred the Witch, Arthur the King, Parsifal the Icon, Lancelot the Star, Galhut the God, Bersalak the Construct, and Bedivere the Engineer. One thing I'm starting to pick up on over in response to the Twilight Court is there's these code names for the main Avengers characters that also pertain to some of these information too. More specifically, I'm talking about Mordred the Witch is like a direct response over to Scarlet Witch carrying like her witch powers too. So I just think that's a clear way that Jed MacKay is kind of setting up all these different comparisons between these characters in an interesting context too. Without further ado, let's head over to Avengers issue 8 to get our first preview over in Myrddin and the Twilight Court fighting back against our roster of Avengers characters. Want to send a thank you to Adventures in Poor Taste and preview some of this really interesting solicit text. Trapped in a world they never made, the Avengers struggle to break free, while one of their number fights their own hopeless battle against Myrddin and his Twilight Court. But Avengers never fight alone, and the most dangerous Avenger joins the conflict. Oh, look at that right there. The various names for the Avengers characters contrasted over with, some of the Twilight Court characters are listed right over on the left side of the page. The Avengers were ambushed by Nightmare, forced to sleep and cast into a dream world where they had been crushed by their otherworldly enemy. Scarlet Witch and the Vision were the only members of the team able to break free and are now standing watch over the still unconscious teammates in the new sentient headquarters, the Impossible City. But things went from bad to worse when the unexpected arrival of Myrddin and his Twilight Court, who have come to execute Kang. So we have Jed MacKay and CF Villa over on the main series contributing writing and art, Federico Blee on colors, VC's Corey Petit on letters, and a cover from Stuart Immonen for Avengers issue 8. On this very first page, we have a preview over of the Twilight Court directly attacking the Avengers. It looks like we have Arthur the King stating, "We need not fight any further," with Lancelot in the background teasing the fact that it might be quite good if we did. It looks like Lancelot is also requesting the Avengers to surrender Kang the Conqueror, who they're currently working with over in the series as well. Yeah, with all these different juxtapositions between these characters, I think it's quite interesting to get a matchup between Scarlet Witch and Mordred the Witch over on this page too. I like all the ways that CF Villa lends like a really curvy line and aesthetic over to this main Avengers book while still focusing in on some of the greater storytelling for the issue. Then on the next page, we get a little bit more of a tease over between, let's see, this character of Mordred stating thank you over to one of her counterparts here. And we get a tease directly from Vision stating, "Tremble, Twilight Court, for 2 of the Avengers are worth any of your number." So honestly, this is just the introduction over to the Twilight Court and the remainder of these characters. I am very excited to see the Avengers finally go up against these characters, and I really hope that in some of the future installments of Avengers, there's going to be a lot more plot information that's maybe going to lead to some even more harrowing tribulation events that are yet to come over from Marvel. I know that just on the horizon of Avengers, we are headed towards that upcoming Blood Hunt storyline. I really hope that Jed MacKay and some of his collaborators are going to be able to find a way to make some of the plot threads over with Myrddin and the Twilight Court transition very naturally into that like big bombastic vampire-esque storyline. I think this upcoming Avengers series has been a little bit of a mess over for the publisher, and I really hope that some of these plot threads over in like the second year of the title will become a lot more stronger, and this book will be able to function as like the fantastic Avengers series that I know Jed MacKay and artist CF Villa are able to produce here. I still have a good feeling about this series, but I do need to see the plot really amp up over in some future installments. All right, thank you so much for sticking aboard and checking out our coverage of that main Avengers book. To be honest, I don't think that book has ever quite lived up to some of my lofty ambitions for it, but I still have hope here. Okay, let's go ahead and transition and talk about another story that happened actually several weeks ago. There was a lot more information that Marvel finally previewed about their upcoming Ultimate Spider-Man series. I know a lot of people are really anticipating this upcoming comic book, which I am too, but I'm just perplexed by the marketing for this series. Marvel continually references this book as the continuation of Peter Parker and Mary Jane's relationship, which is just puzzling to me. Because typically, when author Jonathan Hickman writes a storyline, there's some big, massive plot twist, there's some big, massive status quo shift. And we have learned a little bit more information about Ultimate Spider Man. I want to be a little bit more open minded and see if we have a book that can compete with the way that the main Spider Man series from Zeb Wells spins all these plot threads in really engaging ways. Let's see if we can finally learn just what information the new Jonathan Hickman and Marco Cicchetto Ultimate Spider-Man is utilizing to really set it apart from some of these other Spider-Man comics. Ultimate Spider-Man 1 trailer sends Peter Parker down a dramatically different path. Okay, that sounds good. Let's see what that path actually is. Forged by Jonathan Hickman and Brian Hitch in the recent Ultimate Invasion limited series, Marvel's new Ultimate Universe will be home to radical transformations of your favorite heroes, and nowhere is this more apparent than the upcoming Ultimate Spider-Man. Written by Hickman and drawn by acclaimed artist Marco Cicchetto, Ultimate Spider-Man is the first ongoing series of the new Ultimate line and presents a startling twist to the new Spider-Man mythos. After the maker used time travel to create a world without heroes, Peter Parker lived a relatively normal life, marrying Mary Jane and building a family. Now it's time to set things right. Learning the truth behind his reality, Peter will step up to become the amazing Spider-Man the world didn't know it was missing. I like that idea. I like the idea that nobody knows that a Spider-Man is needed and Peter Parker swings in to become the Spider-Man of the new Ultimate Universe. But I feel like that is the beginning of a story and not, the middle or what's going to lead you to the greater plot. There's been some really interesting teases of Spider-Man shifting his costumes across this book. I hope there's some greater revelation in mind over with that. Glimpse into the Spidey saga unlike any other in the new Ultimate Spider-Man trailer. The trailer introduces readers to the Parkers and shows Peter web-slinging into his heroic destiny and battling new versions of classic villains, including Kingpin and Green Goblin. I'm laughing as I read this because I think one of my nightmares over for this current Ultimate Spider-Man book is for the series to too closely resemble, the original comic book over from Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Bagley. I really want the publisher, I really want Marvel Comics to take as many chances with the main Spider-Man series as possible here. In the Ultimate Universe, they should be really pushing all these comics to the limit. I thought Ultimate Invasion was such a cool way to mix things up in terms of the Ultimate Universe and really put the antagonist of the Marvel Universe in the driver's seat of the series. Bringing back villains like Kingpin and Green Goblin, who were introduced so early into Spider-Man's publishing history, is just disappointing to me in the first place, even though I believe we actually have some Marco Cicchetto pages that look really, really nice and feature just so much beautiful artwork. But at the end of the day, I really want a comic book that can push, the Ultimate Universe to the limit here. Nobody except me says, yeah, Hickman needs to do something unique and interesting. I am so happy to have somebody who actually agrees with me here. I feel like I've been getting a lot of backlash over from some of these opinions, nobody except me. And I also want to take a few moments to say here that, I am just so impressed with the Amazing Spider-Man's gang war story. Even if you don't like the backdrop or the genre or aesthetic of the storyline, I think it's so cool that Zeb Wells has really put so many disparate plot threads into that comic book. Zeb Wells has been working with Tombstone almost since the very beginning of his Spider-Man run, and the fact that he built that up over a year to finally unleash it towards the end of this really pivotal time in the Amazing Spider-Man is super cool. If Jonathan Hickman was doing the same long-term storytelling, I would also, say the same things. I think what he built in Krakoa is amazing and is still being utilized by all the different X-Men writers right now too. Yeah, Gang War 1 was good. Yeah, I thought Gang War First Strike 1 was good too. I really thought that was a really solid issue. I think Zeb Wells had a really strong handle on all those crime lord characters. And once again, if some of the plot threads from Ultimate Invasion kind of spilled into Ultimate Spider-Man, I would be definitely on board and seeing what else we could see here. Also, it's nice to be back to neighborhood local Spidey. I agree. I agree. I think the way that Spider-Man has been interacting over with some of his villains has gotten across this like more neighborhood feeling. Afro SF says, can't wait for Hickman's Spider Man and Peach Momoko's X Men. You know what, Afro SF? I want this book to be good too. Honestly, I would love to read just an awesome Jonathan Hickman, Marco Cicchetto Spider Man comic every single month. I just hope we get away from people like, a new Green Goblin or a new Kingpin. Also, I'd be so disappointed if the Green Goblin over for Ultimate Spider-Man was like Harry or Norman Osborn. I think that would be a huge missed opportunity. I would love it if it was some like weird cosmic character, like maybe a clone of like the Maker or something. Maybe it has something to do with like our universe and then it got mixed up in the new Ultimate Universe. I think the possibilities are endless over for this comic book series, and I'm really going to hold Jonathan Hickman accountable, in particular for his plotting and the plot threads that he chooses to take on over in this series here too. I think that that there is so much potential for Peach Momoko's X-Men, the Ultimate X-Men series too. I think the way that Peach Momoko is like choosing her cast with characters like Armor and the new Maystorm character is so cool. I'm going to be covering that in a lot of depth, and I really hope that Ultimate X-Men is going to be the catalyst for a really like robust Ultimate X-Men line of comics. There's some like really big stuff over on the horizon for the Ultimate Universe, and boy, do I hope each of these comic books can really stick the landing. I think it would be just a massive shame if we got a book that wasn't trying to like push the ceiling of comics to the limit to see just what crazy stories, what crazy scenarios all these creators can go ahead and dream up here. When we decided that we were going to do a book about an older Peter Parker becoming Spider Man, we really wanted to lean into him starting superhero life from a very different place than what's traditionally expected. Peter and MJ being married is one of many decisions that underline this being quite a different kind of Spider Man story. I don't even understand how you can say that because I feel like we've gotten several Spider Man comics with a married Peter Parker. Also, I know that one of the reasons why Marvel doesn't want to put Peter Parker in a relationship over in like the main Spider-Man series is because they don't want Peter Parker to be limited to just one individual person, which I think makes sense. I think if you're going to have Peter Parker be in like such a long publishing line, if he's going to have a history and if every storyline is going to count, I could definitely see how you'd want to shake up his love life once in a while. All right, Ultimate Spider-Man #1 is on sale January 10th. That's just a few weeks away here. So I'm not going to have to wait very much longer to see what kind of plot threads Jonathan Hickman is going to take up in this upcoming series. I think this cover for issue 2 is pretty solid. We get a movie poster-esque collage here. And while I do like the way that Marco Cicchetto has designed his version of Peter Parker, I feel like this is a little bit reminiscent of how Marco Cicchetto draws some of these other like plainclothes civilian characters. Peter, he does look really cool. He's got a really good beard. He's got really fantastic beard here, but I think he's losing that sense of that kind of like loser aspect of his character that makes him appear like more of an everyman in this series. And I think he looks more similar to an action hero that you might expect to see over in like, a recent movie or television show. Here's the cover for Ultimate Spider-Man 3. I think this is so tremendous. This is such a beautifully arranged and composed cover. I think it's really cool to see the way that Peter is taken on Kingpin, but there is nothing about this cover that's really exciting at all. It's arranged beautifully, it's composed well, it's drawn with just so much majesty here. But it looks like this could be an issue of Spider-Man that was published almost decades ago, featuring a big fight between maybe an older Spider-Man, to be fair, fighting over against Kingpin. The one thing I am starting to notice is that it looks like Spider-Man's logo design for his costume looks a little bit different. I wonder if that's going to reference, any big plot thread, any big change in the future here. And I believe we actually even have some interior art over on Ultimate Spider-Man. Let's see if I can navigate Marvel's website and get it up on the screen here. Okay, let's see if you can see that. Perfect. In fact, let's see if we can squish this down a little bit more. Yep, excellent. Okay, so this is the cover to the first issue from Marco Cicchetto. And here we go. This is our interior art. So it looks like Matthew Wilson is lending some of the colors to the interior pages. Once again, this is a beautiful page from Marco Cicchetto. That sense of architecture designed in the background is gorgeous. I think the way that we're introduced to Peter, looking at himself through the mirror on this panel with, the towel or an object kind of breaking some of the view from the page is really, really tremendous here. Also, this kind of glimpse of Peter over with some of his kids is also quite breathtaking. There's so much detail over in Marco Cicchetto's line. It also does look like Peter Parker is seemingly wealthy here, judging from his living conditions. There's some really strong reaction shots and secondary activities from these characters. I really think Cicchetto is just a really, really strong artist and has really solid command over the page. It really does seem like Jonathan Hickman, does have an attachment to creating situations that are a little bit more light, situations that have a bit more levity here. We also get some relationship drama. One of the things about Ultimate Spider-Man that I hope Hickman keeps a close eye to is some of the relationship drama. We recently saw Hickman, I think, kind of fumble it over in the debut with Gods between the characters of Wynn and Aiko Maki. So I really hope there's some restraint in terms of some of the dialogue. And I hope that if Mary Jane and Peter Parker engage in situations where they have a little bit of hostility, there's some restraint exercised from Hickman. I think we're really going to have to see if Hickman is able to write situations with a lot of tension or if there is some underlying issue that we need to be aware of. But still, I think all these pages so far have been nothing short of beautiful. I am still just so taken by the way that Cicchetto in particular is able to arrange this architecture in the background. This is one of the coolest pages that I think we've seen designed yet. The way that this, smaller panel on the left is bleeding out of the page, contrasted by the one on the right, is really, really beautiful. I'm wondering if that's Betty Brant over at the Daily Bugle. Also, how is Peter Parker able to afford this massive apartment if he's just working as a photographer here? Or taking on a salary at the really dumpy Daily Bugle anyhow? I've got a lot of questions for Peter Parker right now. This Green Goblin character, I'm really worried about. Of course, if you're telling a really subversive, a really groundbreaking Spider-Man story, and your first character is Green Goblin, I'm definitely going to be, a little bit disappointed. I would love it, however, if Marvel maybe utilized some really random, some really strange character to put over behind the mask of the Green Goblin. As mentioned earlier, I think I'd just be super disappointed if it was any of the Osborn characters featured on the page. Stark Goblin, yeah, that would be cool. I think that would be really interesting too. I think these J. Scott Campbells just do not match some of the rest of the quality that the other interior artists over for Marvel do. I almost think it's disappointing that we have J. Scott Campbell, lending this cover over to Ultimate Spider-Man. We have Mark Bagley delivering a variant. That's kind of cool because of the way that Mark Bagley was also attached to the first launch of Spider-Man. Let's see what else here. This is one of the variant covers from Marco Cicchetto featuring the black suit cover. And we also have the Ben Reilly cover, Spider-Man 2099. Looks like we have some designs from Marco Cicchetto over with Mary Jane and Peter. Yeah, Peter Parker just looks so incredibly handsome thanks to Chiquetto's line. He looks like, some sort of action model as opposed to that weird lanky teenager that we got to see in the Stan Lee Steve Ditko run. Oh, is this? I was actually about to guess that this was Rob Liefeld, but it's actually Tony Daniel, which I can think which I think you can actually see if you take a closer glance at this cover. I think Tony Daniel's line is just a little bit more precise than Liefeld. This is a nice cover too. Looks like this one is illustrated from Nick Klein. I've been a big fan of Nick Klein for a very, very long time now. I wonder, is this Mateus Manhanini? Oh, it is. Okay, fantastic, fantastic. I've been seeing Hickman collaborate a lot with him. We actually have a cover for an upcoming issue of Gods that we'll look at just after this, where we'll take a look at more of Mateus Manhanini's art. I have no idea where he came from, but all the covers that I've seen from Manhanini have been so, so beautiful and feature this really interesting element of design. It feels like Mateus, as an artist, is actually quite bold and aggressive over on the page. This one, I think, maybe teases the fact that there's something to do with Peter's Spider-Man identity versus his like plainclothes costume too. I think this is actually one of my favorite covers that we've gotten on Ultimate Spider-Man yet. Oh, this is really nice. Oh, of course, this is a David Marquez cover. I'm always impressed by the way that David Marquez utilizes perspectives, and his anatomy for the individual characters is also so clean. I do think the leg over for Spider-Man, on this page, I think maybe it's a little bit too long, but overall here compared to contemporaries, this is really beautiful. This is really breathtaking, and I love the shot with all these birds showing just how vast and cavernous the architecture is with these designs here. I just am not a fan of how Ryan Stegman is able to lay out anatomy. I've been really perplexed with this cover in particular and why Marvel chose it as one of the strongest pieces of marketing for Ultimate Spider-Man. I feel like this cover really plays into the aesthetic that Amazing Spider-Man is going to a more back to basics approach. And I think that that is absolutely the wrong idea for an Ultimate Spider-Man book that should be like pushing the limit of what this medium can do. This cover also have some of the same feelings regarding, but I think that the way Elizabeth Torque is able to lay out the anatomy across these characters is really interesting. In fact, I think Ultimate Spider-Man would probably be a much more subversive comic book if Torque was illustrating some of the interiors for the issue too. But overall here, I think this is also probably one of the strongest covers we've seen for Ultimate Spider-Man yet. This is the second cover over for the series. Also really beautiful here. Okay, I think that's actually going to go ahead and wrap up our coverage over for Ultimate Spider-Man. I'm very worried about this series. Hopefully my fears are going to be put to rest when the issue actually comes out over in January. We have another, or actually, we said we were going to take a look at the upcoming Gods cover from Mateus Manhanini. Let's jump into it right now. This is coming in over from David Brooke at Adventures in Poor Taste. Marvel Comics has released solicitation and cover for Gods 5, Jonathan Hickman and Valerio Schiti's epic focusing on the Marvel Cosmic. It appears Mia, who is introduced in Gods 2, getting a much heavier focus in February. Mia the Magic Girl continues her journey into the crossroads of magic and science in Jonathan Hickman and Valerio Schiti's Gods. Check out the Gods 5 cover by Manhanini on sale this February. All right, so the reason why I wanted to show this cover over in the first place is because I am thrilled at the fact that Hickman is returning to some of his plot threads from New Avengers with the characters of like the Black Swan featured on some of these covers too. I also thought the introduction of Mia the Magic Girl was like one of the best parts over in Gods Chapter 2. To be honest, I think that of all the Jonathan Hickman series since Hickman returned to Marvel, this one has still probably been the weakest. There is way too much dialogue in issue after issue over in this book. One of the things that I'm really going to be looking at when Ultimate Spider-Man comes out in just a few weeks here next month is more restraint in terms of the dialogue from Hickman. I think in particular, as we mentioned, the relationship melodrama between Peter and Mary definitely needs a firm hand here. So I'm also interested to see where the direction of Gods is heading. There's been a lot of speculation across the internet whether Gods is a limited or ongoing series. I think at this point, what I would actually prefer Marvel to do is go ahead and close out this chapter of Gods as soon as possible and to actually release a new miniseries where we can more streamline some of the like aesthetic, some of the dialogue for the series, and just make the approach for Gods a little bit more streamlined for readers coming in off the street. I think the background and all of the detail within Gods is just so amazing. I just don't think the execution of the series, even past the first issue, has matched up to the amazing tapestry and background with some of the pantheon of these characters here. But I do love Mateus Manhanini's cover and the way that Jonathan Hickman seems to be wielding a meta-narrative across some of these books as well. All right, well, that'll go ahead and close out our very brief Gods coverage, as well as the remainder of our Jonathan Hickman material. And let's go ahead and check out a very exciting story. Give me one moment here. Okay, so we are just about to head to a really pivotal time over in the X-Men franchise. The X-Men are just about to close out the Krakoa narrative over with Rise of the Powers of 10 and the Fall of the House of X. But there's also an additional series here that's set to bring back Magneto over to the world of the X-Men. This is really, really interesting because Magneto died in a super epic way during the Judgment Day storyline over in the pages of X-Men Red. This has been ongoing for Magneto as he seemingly lost the will to live over the background of the past few years during X-Men. Let's go ahead and see how writer Al Ewing and some of the creators of these recent X-Men books are planning on resurrecting Magneto in the Resurrection of Magneto issue 1. This article is coming in from Timothy Adams over at comicbook.com. Storm is about to start her journey to bring Magneto back to life in an X-Men Fall of the House of X series. The X-Men lost Magneto back during the Marvel event Judgment Day, where he gave his life to defend Arakko. Even when the X-Men have their own mutant resurrection protocols that can bring any of their fallen back to life. Magneto chose to have his records wiped from the system. Theoretically, there shouldn't be a way for the X-Men to resurrect him. But with this being comics, we all know that isn't the case. That's the setup for the limited series Resurrection of Magneto, with Storm leading the charge. I think one of the most impressive aspects about the resurrection of Magneto that we can see from these pages is the fact that Luciano Vecchio is actually contributing the art to this series. I think Vecchio's art is just so incredible. It's so imaginative and strikes such a curvy line that manages to evoke these really late-stage X-Men plot threads with so much wonder and intrigue. Comicbook.com has the first exclusive look at Resurrection of Magneto by Al Ewing and Luciano Vecchio. The preview starts with an ominous look at Magneto, who has different variations of his signature helmet laying on the ground beside him. Next, Storm wakes up from a bad dream next to her lover Craig Marshall, who tries to console her. The two then stand before some teleportation spheres, with Storm charging headfirst into one. This takes her into a place in the afterlife where she is greeted by Tarn the Uncaring, who Magneto famously killed early on in Ewing's X-Men Red run. Before them are some cosmic figures like the Living Tribunal and Death. Finally, Another figure from the afterlife, Storm's ancestor Ashaki, appears before Storm. What is Resurrection of Magneto about? The description of Resurrection Magneto reads life death. On Krakoa, resurrection from the dead was as easy as completing a circuit, but Krakoa fell. The time of easy miracles is over, and only the hard roads are left. Now it falls to Storm as the epic conclusion to the Krakoan Age looms, to bring their oldest enemy home to fight against the fall of the House of X. But after all he did, after all that was done to him, can Magneto bear to return? Okay, so Resurrection of Magneto, it looks like it's coming out just a few weeks after Ultimate Spider-Man 1. We're going to be treated to this over on January 24th. Once again, we have just a beautiful page here from Luciano Vecchio. We can see Storm waking up next to Craig Marshall, who's also been set up within the pages of X-Men Red. He's actually continued to show up in that series again and again and again. And we see Storm getting this like nightmarish vision here over across the issue as well. There we go. On this next page, we're introduced to Storm suited up in her most recent costume during the Krakoan era. I think that like formless way that Luciano Vecchio captures Storm's hair as like a billow of smoke is also so cool. I feel like we've been seeing a lot of artists capture this, especially across X-Men Red recently. But I think Vecchio really, really outdoes this sense of design on the page too. This is a very cool page that we got a little bit of a tease at earlier in this article with Tarn the Uncaring. Just such like an unhinged, such an interesting character over in X-Men Red. I think early on in X-Men Red, that series was devoted to fleshing out the world of Arakko with such a sort of wide lens. And I think Tarn was just such a great way to emphasize the vicious nature of some of those people, as well as the kind of outline and aesthetic over for the greater X-Men Red series. Nobody except me says yams. On this next chapter here, we get a reference over to one of Storm's ancestors here. Really strong facial expressions once again from Vecchio. Really breathtaking page design. I think the cat, towards the top of Storm's ancestor, also really breathtaking to see within this page here. And yeah, the way this is designed is also really mesmerizing, with Storm kind of draped in shadow over on the left side of the page, and then getting a big reaction shot over in a smaller panel. I could not be more excited for the resurrection of Magneto. I think having Storm in the driver's seat is also going to be a ton of fun within this series. I'm very happy to see Al Ewing using his plot threads that he's weaved throughout his time over on X-Men Red. Nobody except me says, lol, the story got Storm caked up. Love the art. Me too, me too. Love to see Storm get a bit of a respite in the middle of her really dramatic Fall of X life as well. All right, well, that was really fantastic. I am so ready to go ahead and check out, that upcoming. Oh goodness, what was the book we were just looking at? I'm so excited for Resurrection of Magneto. I can't wait to see the X-Men comics close out some of those big Krakoan storylines. All right, we have a really fun news article here. Nobody except me. I'm interested, but I feel like he didn't stay gone long enough. Similar to Miss Marvel, we got Joseph revealed like 2 weeks later. You're right. Straight up, you're right. You're totally right. Yeah, we did get Joseph just a couple weeks after he left in the main Scarlet Witch series. Also, you're totally right in saying he hasn't been gone long enough. He probably should have been taken off the board a little bit longer, but if they're going to do it in some really like crazy Fall of X style way, I'm actually perfectly fine with them doing that. Now the original is back before we even got that plot followed up on. Yeah, in the last issue of Scarlet Witch from Steve Orlando, we did get a bit more of a follow up on that plot, And we also got to see, how Joseph was kind of deceiving Wanda throughout that series, but it did feel a little bit like a bridge there. And I felt like there was a little bit more context that we probably could have gotten before they closed out that series. Um, when we first got the reveal of Joseph, I was so hyped. I thought Marvel was going to weave him back into some of the other X-Men books. I feel like Scarlet Witch is a little bit more like disassociated. It's a little bit more off the beaten path, although it does have some reference to those X-Men comics with characters like Polaris and Quicksilver. I think that Joseph is a missed opportunity for Krakoa. I think that one of the Krakoa books should be following up on that storyline yesterday. And I think you're totally right. Okay. Yeah, I thought they were introducing Joseph in Scarlet Witch to bring him into X-Men Red. That is literally what I thought they were going to do. And also, we've kind of seen them do that with the character of Apocalypse. He's shown up between books like Immortal X-Men, X-Men. We've gotten him in X-Men Red 2. I want to see even more of Marvel's editorial juggling all these individual characters between the books. Another way that I think Marvel is actually doing this really well is the way that they're using this upcoming Thunderbolts series as a sequel to the Captain America Sentinel of Liberty comic book, which I'm a massive fan of. We covered it in a lot of detail and context over on our channel. Let's go ahead and preview some of the lettered interior artwork over for Thunderbolts issue 1. This series is looking like it's going to be really epic. Over in Captain America Sentinel of Liberty, we got to see Bucky really get powered up, but in a deceitful way towards Steve Rogers, as well as some of his other friends over in the Marvel Universe. Excuse me. So in the Captain America Sentinel of Liberty comic book, Steve, Captain America, really fought back against the Outer Circle as well as their Century game. In order to stop the Outer Circle, Bucky Barnes went undercover over as the New Revolution, and this caused a lot of friction over between Cap and Bucky. And while I really loved the Captain America Sentinel of Liberty book from from Colin Kelly, Jackson Lansing, and Carmen Carnero, I was a little bit disappointed in the melodramatic way that Bucky was written. So now, in this sequel series from Lansing, Kelly, and artist Geraldo Borges, I feel like we're getting a second chance for them to really capitalize on the interesting plot points and story status over for Bucky Barnes. In this story, it looks like Bucky is trying to use this information that he's acquired from the Outer Circle in order to stop the various characters in the Marvel Universe. Particularly, it looks like in Thunderbolts 1, Bucky is waging a war over against the character of Red Skull. Let's go ahead and check out a little bit more about it in our preview for Thunderbolts 1 coming in from Brian Cronin on CBR.com. Exclusive, see Winter Soldier recruit an MCU standout to his new Thunderbolts team. At the end of Colin Kelly and Jackson Lansing and artist Carmen Carnero's Captain America Sentinel of Liberty run, James Winter Soldier Barnes has gotten a hold of covert information that anyone has ever had access to. And in this CBR exclusive preview of next week's Thunderbolts 1, we see who Barnes first approaches to help him organize this information into a way to attack the people they think are most protected from attack. Thunderbolts 1, written from Kelly and Lansing and artist Geraldo Borges, and letterer Joe Sabino, picks up right where we last saw Barnes in Captain America finale, where he took down the Outer Circle, a powerful and hidden cabal known that had been manipulating the world since the events of World War I. With the assistance of Captain America, Destroyer, and Nomad, now Barnes is putting together a new team. All right, let's go ahead and check out some of these interior pages. I've been noticing that as Marvel gets closer to the publication of these comic book series, they change these really subtle elements of the cover. Over on this cover, we can see the text here stating the Red Skull must die. And we have Bucky shooting the Red Skull, and it was really super melodramatic comic book cover. This actually should be a red alarm for some of the interiors of the issue, but my God, the artwork from Geraldo Borges is so detailed, so staggering across this series. And I think the way that Kelly and Lansing have introduced some of these captions in the reveal over on the next page is quite interesting. I'm going to go ahead and kick off our preview here by reading some of these text pieces. I've been watching you, Bucky Barnes, your beautiful little revolution. So many saved you from the life you led, and even more bodies left bleeding in the shadows you call home. Justice, righteousness, spectacular stuff. A century of conspiracy turned into a pile of quarantine rubble in the Rockies. Did you really think I wouldn't prepare for the day you come to get your pound of revenge from me? Because honestly, Bucky, I don't care what kind of smolder you give me with those long beaten puppy dog eyes. Yeah, I think the way that the tension is built up across like all these panels that swap locations around the world is so cool here. We go all the way from Berlin to Mumbai to Rio de Janeiro. And the reveal of this character who Bucky is actually talking to is very cool as well. I think it's perfectly captured by Geraldo Borges with so much intrigue as we see Bucky wielding a gun towards Contessa Valentina Allegra de Fontaine as she states, I will put a bullet in your head and keep your fancy arm as a trophy. So Bucky is really trying to break the tension over in this sequence. We can see him stating over to Contessa, the century game is over. The people you build OXC to serve, they're dead or gone. Contessa says in response, you just wasted the last 7 years of my life, and I hate wasting my time. I want to take a few moments and just reference the fact that this art is focusing on a more tropical setting, which also contrasts with like all the disparate tones we've seen on the first page too. There's an amazing sense of visual design to the architecture here, and also the way that the facial expressions carry the tension over from panel to panel. Very cool too. Bucky says, you misunderstand me. I'm not here for revenge or to destroy what you've built. Quite the opposite, actually. See, I've got the new kind of mission. Yeah, Bucky breaks the tension all the way, puts his arms up, puts the gun down, and finally says to her towards the very last panel here, this is justice like lightning, which is, of course, the tagline over for the Thunderbolts roster of characters. And we're also set up with the main mission, the main status quo over for our team stating, tonight, the Red Skull must die. In addition to Contessa and Bucky, it looks like Sharon Carter is also joining our team as the Destroyer, which is an identity she's just recently taken on in Captain America's Sentinel of Liberty. Yeah, really cool stuff. And also, one of the most perplexing things about this Thunderbolts run is it's only 4 issues. It feels to me like, just based on the huge cast of characters across this book, that they will not be able to cover all of the information they need to within just 4 individual pages, or just 4 individual issues in total here. I'm wondering if this is the sort of catalyst to a bigger ongoing series over in the near future. Bucky Barnes, the New Revolution, just inherited a mountain of covert intel, and he has one objective: justice like lightning. He's going after the establishment, the people no one else is willing or able to take down, and he'll do whatever it takes to win. Teaming with the mysterious Contessa Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, Bucky assembles a team of Black Ops heavy hitters to pursue high-profile targets like the Red Skull, Kingpin, and even Doctor Doom himself. No one is safe from the Thunderbolts. Can we get a release date on Thunderbolts 1? I will be right back. We need a release date for Thunderbolts issue 1. Okay, I have this article from July, and it really just states on sale in December. So it looks like we are going to be getting the release date over for Thunderbolts very, very soon. Okay, I want to. Oh, let's see here. So I want to also talk about a very surprising Spider-Man story that Marvel just recently came out with here. This one also took place just a few weeks ago, but it's actually something that I'm pretty anticipating over at the publisher. Let's go ahead and check out the upcoming Spectacular Spider-Man comic book coming in from Greg Weisman and Umberto Ramos. Spectacular Spider-Man proves two webheads are better than one. Superstar creators Greg Weisman and Umberto Ramos team up for an all-new Spidey series starring in March, featuring both Peter Parker and Miles Morales. The Marvel Universe boasts two amazing Spider-Man, and this March they'll join forces in their first ongoing series ever, Spectacular Spider-Man. Not only will the series team up two of comic books' biggest icons, it'll also team up two industry superstars, writer Greg Weisman and Umberto Ramos. Okay, so you might be asking yourself, why is it that we are talking about this series? It seems like I do have this really big sense of Spider-Man fatigue, and I would say, just to be completely honest, that Humberto Ramos is a little bit hit or miss for me in terms of the various Marvel projects. However, it's Greg Weisman's Spectacular Spider-Man animated series and Gargoyles projects that make this something that should definitely be on your radar here. The way that the Spectacular Spider-Man animated series ran through Spider-Man continuity in this really quick, fast-paced way was so engaging. I'm such a big fan of that series and really want to encourage anybody go ahead and check it out. The more time you invest into that show, the more rewarded you'll be with the way it's able to take these plot threads across issue to or across essentially episode to episode and introduce some of this early Spider-Man continuity within just a slightly different context and a more modern aesthetic. I think it's one of the best like Spider-Man origin adaptations we've seen, especially in terms of like an animated project too. So I feel like there is so much room for Weisman to really craft a solid comic book series. Definitely haven't seen Weisman take on the character of Miles Morales, but he's already shown a knack and affinity towards writing these younger characters. Also, I hope, just like that Spectacular Spider-Man show, that there's going to be a lot of plot threads and a lot of continuity that Weisman is going to be working with. In fact, let's go ahead and check out if this one is actually in continuity and if we can learn about what the plot of the overall series is going to be here. Together, they'll introduce a fresh dynamic between Miles and Peter as superhero partners who swap intelligence and tips, combine their strength against threats, and learn from each other and learn from each other's differences in age and experience. The duo's journey kicks off with an epic run-in with the Jackal, and fans can get their first look at the action and a special announcement video featuring never-before-seen artwork. I'm so thrilled to be writing Spidey again, and the fact that I get to write both Spideys together makes the gig doubly sweet. It's fun for me because in this book, I see the younger Miles trying really hard to show his maturity to his mentor Peter, while the older Pete feels free to let out his inner 16-year-old with Miles. So there's a bit of role reversal with the normal mentor-protege relationship that one might expect to see. I am seeing a lot of other media and their adaptation of like Spider-Man in Miles really focus on the relationship dynamics between these two characters. I have a feeling that like in a year, in 2 years, if I see like any other media adapting this dynamic, I'm going to start calling it out because it's going to start to feel a little bit derivative. The Spider-Man video game has touched on this in a lot of additional context too. Let's see. From a very young age, my goal was to draw Spider-Man for Marvel Comics. And now that it has become a recurring reality in my life, I enjoy every occasion which I am called to do that, or as I like to say, come back home. I could not ask for a better way to do that than alongside Greg Weisman, who gave us the greatest Spider-Man TV series. So that was a quote over from Umberto Ramos. I am so excited that Ramos is excited about, rendering the interiors on this book. Once again, I think one of the biggest things that's kind of like detracting me from really enjoying his artwork in a more serious capacity is just the way that he designs some of this anatomy. This leg from Spider-Man is just absolutely endless, as well as some of the arms and legs from Miles. I think these feet have just incredibly like inaccurate proportions. And eventually, after seeing like page after page of Umberto Ramos art, I think it does start to get to me over time. I think some of Ramos's contemporaries have also kind of changed the way that they've introduced some of these lines. Like I think Todd Nowak at DC has really leveled up some of the artwork and the way that like the anatomy is presented. I would love for Ramos to follow suit here, but at the end of the day, this is just my opinion. And I'm very thankful about the fact that Marvel is introducing yet another outlet for the incredibly talented Greg Weisman to go ahead and tackle the Marvel Comics universe. Okay, we may have just a few stories left here. You know what? I am a little bit disturbed at how little Beast World material we've seen published here. So we have a duo of Beast World stories to go ahead and explore and get into today. I don't know if you're aware, but over at DC Comics, the publisher has just went ahead and kicked off one of their most recent events. And for me, this one is a really big one because we've been covering it in a lot of depth up on the channel. I think one of the very first videos we actually ever came out with was Justice League. The particular Justice League issue where our heroes went to the moon and faced their bitter end here. I think it's super interesting with the fact that DC has kind of kept on with this status quo in the wake of Dark Crisis and has transitioned over from the Justice League to the or not to the Teen Titans, but as the Titans for the premier superhero team. And now our heroes are finally engaged within their first event over at DC called Beast World. We just got the first issue last week over from DC, and we actually had a really fantastic review that we ran over on the book. I thought it was pretty interesting, too, how the threat of Beast World naturally stemmed from the preceding, like, 5 or so issues of the main series, where we got to see Brother Eternity try and cast his orbit with the Church of Eternity as far as it could possibly go, and get enveloped over in this large-scale Beast World crossover. Let's go ahead and see what Tom Taylor has to say about the core series in his Adventures in Poor Taste interview here. Titans, let's see here. I think you've done a really great job of building Garfield Logan over your Titans run. What about him, aside from obvious stuff in his powers, make him a good lead? Tom Taylor says, I think as soon as I started writing him, and particularly as soon as Nicholas Scott and I started drawing him, I quickly realized that he's the heart of the Titans, he's their soul. I found a similar thing when I was writing X-Men, and found that same thing with Nightcrawler. I found these characters, and as soon as you jump into something like that, it's very hard to get it out of your head. And so when it came to writing an event, if you've read everything I've ever written, Deceased or Unjustice, I like tearing people's hearts out. I like making fans cry on public transport. But as soon as I identified him as the heart, I was like, okay, well, first of all, I want to elevate him. I don't want him to be the joke character off to the side. There was something really perfect about lifting Gar up to the point where Beast Boy would be the only person who can save the world. But then also, putting him in that kind of danger. And what does the rest of the Titans? That's the key element. Towards the end of Titans Beast World, we see Garfield Logan really transform into this massive creature here to do battle over with the Necro Star. I think Tom Taylor has been illustrating just so much pathos within his characterization over for Beast Boy here. And I like how Tom Taylor also references the fact that Nightcrawler is the heart of the X-Men. I think so many comic book creators have explored Kurt over in that context here too. One more element that Beast Boy really brings to the narrative is his relationship with Raven. The way that these two characters have kind of cemented and gotten just closer and closer to each other as this Titans ongoing series has moved from issue to issue, I think has helped made this series feel more relatable and has helped this current cast of Titans feel like actual people as opposed to just crime fighting superhero objects. Similarly, you've done a great job of uplifting the whole Titans team. Was there a sense in creating this event that you're putting a cap on the big setup? Or did they never need an event to be big, or is this just some big celebration? Yeah, I want to hear Tom Taylor talk a little bit more about the kind of conflict and outline over with this series, too. In this phase of DC, I think it's stepping up to fulfill the promise that they've had since they were the new Teen Titans. The idea that these kids would grow up to be the premier superhero team was incredibly important. I don't think they need an event like this for validation, but having said that, I think the fact that the Titans have never had an event like this is astounding. Like, I kept getting told that early on. I was like, hang on, what? This has never happened before, which is such a weird thing. But here we are. I mean, this event really does test them in big ways. Yes, there's very big moments for every Titan, but this isn't necessarily going to end the way you think it will end. I definitely like what Tom Taylor is saying there, and I also like the way that he's utilizing of these various Teen Titans characters. I keep saying Teen Titans, but they're the Titans now. Another just really, really interesting element too is if you go back and check out the original kind of new Teen Titans run over with Marv Wolfman, over in that series, we got events periodically with characters like Raven. And I really don't think that some of those elements, should have gone away in the DC universe. There should have always been, big, large scale Titan storylines. And I'm actually very happy to hear Tom Taylor say that, the Titans really need some big event to really put them like towards the capstone of DC's publishing line as well. I want to talk about, however briefly or however you want to tease, the big bad known as Necrostar. I love big cosmic villains and a kind of unfathomable monster. What should folks know ahead of time? So Taylor says there's not much they can reveal about Necrostar. It all comes together in Titans 6 and 7. That's where Necrostar and its roots take place. Basically, it's connected to Tamaran in a way that people won't see coming, and obviously, Brother Eternity is the one who launches this, and we get a lot of backstory. There's a lot of things that are key for Starfire in Titans 6 and 7, which are our Beast World tie-ins. They're not just tie-ins for the sake of it, they're really, really integral to the story. I really like this interview question too. They're asking about Tamaran and with Tamaran's relation to the Necrostar as well as Starfire. I love how some of the backstory and like science fiction elements of all these Titans characters are informing the main plot of Beast World 2. So Tom Taylor says, I think as soon as I jumped on the Titans, I wanted to sort of elevate every one of them. I wanted to know more about them, and when I found holes in Starfire's origin, which has changed a few times, there's always been a number of projects in New 52 and all the way back to her origins. I wanted to solidify that and also twist it a little bit. As you'll see, there's things about her past that she doesn't know that we'll learn with her. So I wanted all these Titans to have their moments, and this is the event that will hopefully do that. Oddly enough, I think one of the things that's like been holding Starfire back for a long time has just been her weird, like retro-inspired costume. Thankfully, in this new Titans book, they've kind of cleaned it up. They've given her a more streamlined costume that shows, I think like a little bit of skin, but not too much, thankfully, and has done a good job characterizing her. I think now we just need a DC creator like Tom Taylor to really come in and take her seriously. I think Tom Taylor has done some good job characterizing her, but it's hard because there's just so many like disparate characters in the main Titans book. There also needs to be time for characters like Wally, Nightwing, Raven, Beast Boy, Cyborg. It's a pretty big roster of characters that are all really important. Let's see what's next. She also mentioned in the first issue of Beast World, but we have to talk about Amanda Waller. I feel like she's going to play a big role in this event and everything happening in DC What can you tease about that? So it looks like Taylor has to stay a little bit more tight lipped on this one. He says, all I can say that is yes. Amanda Waller has a very, very large part to play in this event. We've been talking about this for years and where we want to position her. Literally, I think San Diego, not this year, but last year, Josh Williamson and I were sitting probably with DC editor Paul Kaminsky and other, just talking about where we want to place her and how important her role is going to be. I've talked about the fact that the status quo really does change at the end of this, and Amanda Waller is a very large part of that. All will be revealed. Hey, so we actually got to see a little bit more follow up on this plot thread in like the second half of the Beast World issue. We actually got to see the character of Dr. Hate manifest over from the Night Terrors event. I said it over in my review. I'll say it again here. I love how the dawn of DC continuity has been a little bit more solid over from book to book and series to series. And everybody who's like critiquing the DC universe right now, I have never one time heard them reference the fact that DC has like been building all of these stories next to each other. Also, I just realized that we have the first issue right up there, right behind my very shiny head. All right, let's see what else we have to learn over in Beast World 1. Without spoiling too much, I do love Dr. Hate's role in issue 1. It's a solid support role, but he's also the lead villain in a lot of ways. Taylor says, I think a lot of people are going to be expecting this to see like a romp with a bunch of beast people, a bunch of people who are turning to otters and kangaroos and stuff, but it's kind of not that for a lot of this. There's a lot more going on in this story than it looks like on the surface level. Yes, you do get Nightwing turned into a fox because we'd be inhuman monsters not to do that. People want to see that. And yes, somebody in the Gotham group turned Harley Quinn into a giant muscle-bound bunny. There is a lot of pain to come for our characters in Beast World. Okay, you know what? I think Tom Taylor has given us enough information to maybe draw a little bit of criticism pertaining to particularly how this story is constructed. It almost seems like, judging from reading that text, that Taylor doesn't really want to turn Harley Quinn into a muscle-bound bunny, or was it Nightwing turning into a fox? And it looks like he just really wants to manage those individual subplots that he's been referencing with characters like Brother Eternity. I'm wondering if DC introduced the kind of like animal aesthetic, or if there's like some other way that Tom Taylor would have rather realized the backdrop of this story. I feel like a lot of people are cringing at Beast World without maybe looking at how this storyline has been building within the main Titans book for quite a while here. I also just absolutely love this Avant Heist page over with Batman. We get really, really beautiful panel bleeds and just a great way to introduce and organize the team. Also, man, shout out to DC. I keep seeing like more and more and more Michael Holt show up across the line, Mr. Terrific. It's always a good day when Mr. Terrific is hanging out with the rest of our eclectic DC cast members. I feel like the idea of the whole everybody gets turned into a giant animal is really ridiculous. And I think it lures people into this false sense of, oh, this is going to be kind of goofy. And then I read the first issue and thought, they're not messing around. Tom Taylor, it's been interesting because we have the Beast World Tour issues, which are written by people like Chip Zdarsky, Cy Spurrier, Josh Williamson, and we have the creative teams that are essential to these characters where these cities are taking place that are joining us, as well as some other great teams. So it's been interesting watching them take this Bible I wrote for the event and who went ridiculous with it, like Harley Quinn is a giant bunny. But then who went terrifying with it, like Cy Spurrier turning Gar into a giant hornet. But certainly, I think we sort of lured people into these with amusing ideas. Like Gar becoming Starro called Garo, that's funny, but wait until you read it. Yeah, the idea of like all the spores influencing people within the DC universe is another silly idea. But then when but then when I think you see it in practice on the page, there's this element of horror that kind of consumes, some of these Titans pages too. Also, like the idea of Brother Blood, like coming back as a cult leader, dubbing himself Brother Eternity, that is such an absurd idea. but Tom Taylor has committed to it again and again and again throughout this run. And I think the end result is a surprisingly fantastic DC comic book. Just a couple more questions for you. I think one of the many things I've been thinking about is I feel like there's been so many events as of late, Dark Crisis, Night Terrors, and Gotham War. Was there trepidation on your end of, is this just going to be another event? Or do you feel like there's something kind of important to having these events back to back to back to back to back? Each of these events they've been mostly for a reason. Like you see Dr. Hate at the end of Night Terrors. Night Terrors gets too much hate. Okay, I'm just gonna say it. I'm just gonna come out and say it. All right. If you didn't enjoy, Deadman, Sandman, and Damian like hanging out together to stop a supernatural threat, I don't know what to say to you. Okay, and the way that all of like the DC Comics line just plunged into those two issue like nightmare dream stories, I think that was a lot of fun. I was very disappointed by the fan response to it, and I was just sad that like not as many people were checking out those videos. It was a really fun time. We got a lot of great content. Detective Comics was so breathtaking across those two issues. And there's just countless, like, really solid material. I think Green Lantern also just had a really fantastic publishing run during Night Terrors. Like, each issue of Green Lantern has really brought that series into the next chapter. Yes, there were some Night Terrors books that weren't that good, but you should have definitely been reading the main series. We've seen the rise of Waller all over this. There are things that happen in Dark Crisis to elevate the Titans to where they are now. So Josh Williamson and I were certainly talking across all of these and making sure there was synergy and we were working together rather than as opposing forces. But I think one of the best things for me about Beast World is how long I've known we were building to this. I know, yeah, you could definitely see that because of the plot thread with Brother Eternity and because of all those spores, the way that Linda actually, swallowed a spore and then also got influenced by like Brother Eternity's weird cult. Super interesting. And the fact that all this culminated in Beast World was super, super cool. This is something that we've been building to, and it's not something that happens across every book in Halt's other stories. It's something that's integrated into Nightwing and Titans. And then we have our Beast World Tour stories, and it's not like, okay, Flash stops now to deal with this. It's not that kind of line-wide event. It's an event that's important to the characters and central to this. And to me, I get a chance to write more Titans, which I'm not going to argue with, as we're trying to elevate them to this massive level to show how important we are. Yeah, I think that is just an amazing page from Yvonne Heiss. Yet another one of the most epic pages over across Beast World issue 1, showing Garfield turning into Garo. All right, let's go ahead and close out our interview here with these last couple questions. I do think these events have been pretty high caliber and done in such a thoughtful and incremental fashion. But I'm also curious if you feel indebted somehow. Like everything has to resonate the same tone or feeling and meet these accomplishments of other events, or is everything a little more freeform for you? That is a really weird question. I feel like Taylor has already said that he's been trying to follow up on some of the plot threads that he's weaved in with his Titans book, and that's kind of how he's weaved these events. Let's see how Taylor answers the question. I think there's an immense freedom here. I think considering this is an event that touches every corner of the DCU, they've said, Tom, go for it. They've seen what I've done with Deceased and Injustice and gone, okay, you'll do something like this in continuity. I understand I can't break things, but I can bend them. I can bend figures until their legs are pointing the wrong direction. So this is really me kind of unleashed. And no, I don't have to follow the tones of what's come before. One of the beauties of working for DC and working for these companies and doing this is they're not coming to you because you can mimic someone else's voice. They're coming to you because you're a writer and they appreciate what you bring. And in Beast World, we bring it all in spades. Yep, that's exactly what I thought he would say, essentially. I don't think DC has some kind of mandate where they say you have to put this and this and this in a DC event, because there's so much that is so different about Night Terrors as opposed to Beast World. I think like one piece of media where you can feel that a lot more is definitely in terms of the movies for both Marvel and DC. I feel like especially for like the main DC movies like Man of Steel, Batman versus Superman, there must have been this edict of a more darker direction. In the MCU, there's all these things that every single movie has, whether it be like a throwaway villain, a joke, jokes within the same context, the same tone across film to film. I don't think you see that if you compare stories like Night Terrors over to Beast World. Last question. You mentioned this in other interviews and also just a few moments ago, but there's this idea of a new status quo. Can you tease, however cryptically, what that might look like? I can't tease too much, but I can say that Amanda Waller is central to it, that we are coming to a time where she grasps more power, and that's about all I can say. Okay, this is an older article about Beast World, but it was still surprisingly relevant over from Adventures in Poor Taste. There were a lot of really fantastic questions, and I also think Tom Taylor did a really great idea establishing like his edict and also like what some of his accomplishments are in the series. The one thing that I picked up on in my coverage of Titans and Titans Beast World is just that Tom Taylor seems to be like a really character first writer as we've gotten like more closely associated with the run. And I feel like that is just a great way to build really naturally fantastic stories. Okay, thank you for checking out our Titans Beast World run, our interview. Let's see what else we have in store to touch on today. Adventures in Poor Taste posted this article on SpiderMan. I don't think we're going to cover it all, but it's still very cool to see some of the comic book creators here at Los Angeles Comic Con. I want to give a shout out over to this piece by Collier Jennings. I see we have creators like Zeb Wells, we have Dan Slott over in attendance. And we previewed this cover, I believe, yesterday over on the stream too. There's going to be a really exciting new issue of Miles Morales that looks like it's also going to set up an interesting new character. And the reason why I opened up this article is because there's a really interesting preview page for Amazing Spider-Man 39 that I actually haven't seen before. I have been so excited about Janice Lincoln returning over to Amazing Spider-Man, and it looks like she's back suited up as the Beetle over in this interior preview page. I can see we have the White Rabbit in the background. And maybe these other characters behind Janice serving as a girl gang to fight back against Spider-Man and some of his gang war allies. Also have a pretty good page from John Romita Jr. Once again, John Romita Jr.'s anatomy really needs work, especially with these like lanky villainous characters. But the design of the page, the composition with She-Hulk is really striking and beautiful here. Feels like there's going to be a lot of energy in these Amazing Spider-Man pages coming in from Romita Jr. and actually still really excited about whatever the next steps of the gang war are looking like. You know what? We have some stories that we actually should cover, but not for like 15, 20 minutes. We also have a cover over for Vengeance of the Moon Knight issue 2. This one is written from David Brooke at Adventures in Poor Taste. Courtesy of Marvel Comics, AIPT can show you Vengeance of the Moon Knight issue 2. Looks like this one is set to release over on February 14th. Vengeance of the Moon Knight continues Jed MacKay and Alessandro Capuccio's run, but I think they're taking on a new protagonist, a new character under their Moon Knight costume, but they haven't revealed who it is yet. Artist David Finch is still rendering the covers for the series. He's been working with Moon Knight for a really, really long time. Khonshu vs. Khonshu. The Fist of Khonshu fights Fist of Khonshu is the new Hunter's Moon, brings the fight to the Midnight Mission and Hunter's Moon. But what could have drove these brothers to battle? And with the mission a battleground, what of those who seek aid? Yeah, really cool, mesmerizing cover with Hunter's Moon, Khonshu, and our new Moon Knight hero. A lot of people, I think, thought that Moon Knight would actually be Hunter's Moon, but I don't necessarily think it is, just based on this cover and solicit text that we're checking out. All right, we have another really fast news story to cover here. This one coming in once again from David Brook at Adventures in Poor Taste. This news story, very weird. Yvonne Rice is just coming off some incredible interiors over with Titans Beast World, but it looks like as of yesterday, Yvonne Rice has stated he no longer works for DC Comics. I'm wondering if he finished up Beast World and just left, or if he was in the middle of that series. Let's see what he has to say here. Longtime DC Comics artist Yvonne Rice has revealed via his Instagram he will not be working with DC Comics anymore. In the post, which you can read below, Rice thanks DC Comics for the 20 years of getting to draw their superheroes, but it's time for a new adventure and challenges. He hasn't revealed what these new adventures could be, but one might guess that it could have something to do with Ghost Machine, a new outfit led by Jeff Johns, Jason Fadbach, Peter Tomasi, Brian Hitch, Francis Manipal, and other artists joining in but are not yet revealed. More on the creator-owned and operated company Ghost Machine here, which will be published by Image Comics. Let's see what Yvonne Rice has to say about leaving DC. It's been 20 years drawing the greatest superheroes on Earth. I had the opportunity to work with the best people in the market, creating the best stories, editors, writers, inkers, colorists, letterers, and more. Lots of names to remember and write. Larry, Paul, Joe, Auclair, Campos, Brian, and many more. With Jeff, I created the biggest comics I could, like Sinestro War, Blackest Night, Brightest Day, Aquaman, Trinity War, as an example. DC has always gave me the best opportunities and conditions, and I can't thank them enough for that. Thank you, DC. And that means thank you to everyone I had the opportunity to work with. You can find my latest DC project, Titans Beast World, now in the store, and you can always check out my work in DC Trades and Collections. Now it's time for a new adventure and new challenges. Oh, I like this article from AIPT. Let's check this out. Rice most recently drew Teen Titans, I keep saying Teen Titans. It is Titans Beast World, in which our reviewer said he is a masterclass artist who is well known for his skill, and this issue is a perfect example as of why his work on Blackest Night is some of the best in Big Two comics. Periodically, I do see creators, who have been working at Marvel and DC for like a really, really long time, like Rice, go ahead and move on to like Image Comics. I remember too, at one point, Mike Deodato Jr., the current artist on The Flash, announced that he was leaving Big Two Comics for a little while and ended up heading back over to The Flash eventually. And while I selfishly hope that Yvonne Rice will head back over to DC or Marvel before his career ends, before he draws his very last comic book issue, I hope he's able to find a place to spot for him over at DC or over at whichever publisher he's headed to next, where he can kind of utilize his talents here. Wishing Yvonne Rice all the best and absolutely love his work, and I don't think anything will ever change that. All right, I'm going to go ahead and take a look and see if we're going to cover this last story. Give me one moment. Okay. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming aboard and checking out our stream today. I hope you enjoyed all of our coverage for the various books. I think it was really awesome checking out the Resurrection of Magneto. I had a blast reading some of the intent over behind Titans Beast World and that really large-scale interview that we went ahead and checked out. thank you so much for coming aboard and checking out our stream. We'll have some video reviews over on Tuesday for upcoming DC comics, and we'll be heading back into the world of whatever Marvel has in store this Wednesday as well. I want to thank you one last time for coming to check up over on our stream, and we'll be back really soon for more awesome Marvel and DC Comics content. Thanks so much, and I'll see you soon.